thank you for tuning in online tonight for our Wednesday night broadcast at Victory. We're so thankful for each and every one of you that tunes in for all our services, whether it be on Sundays or Wednesdays. We're just very, very thankful for that. One of the things that we strive to do here is to develop a deeper walk with the Lord as well as deeper connections with one another. And we do that through groups, small group settings that meet here on campus. And we would love for you to be a part of these groups if you aren't already. We have multiple times that they meet, Sundays and on Wednesdays. Tonight, right after we hear from some special music from our worship team, we're going to move into one of those groups and let you hear and experience the teaching. We hope and trust it's a blessing to you tonight. Thank you so much again for being here this evening.
I stood there as they tried him for crimes he hadn't done. No one else believed it, but I just knew he was the one. I slid back into the crowd, trying to go unseen. But when Pilate cried out, beat him, he pointed straight to me. My friends, they all cheered me as I took the whip in hand, placing stripes upon the back of this guiltless man. And when he turned and looked at me, from my mind I can't erase, I'll never forget the look on his face. He said, I'm doing this for you, and I will still love you when you're through. I'm doing this for you. Though it took me by surprise when I saw love in his eyes, he said, I'm doing this for you. And high on top Mount Calvary, with hammer and nail, it became my duty to crucify this man. Well, I heard my friends gathering for his robe at my side, and I couldn't turn away as he looked into my eyes. Father, forgive them, I heard him cry aloud. Behold the King of Kings. Someone mocked from the crowd. But then the ground shook and the thunder rolled as he gave up the ghost. But until the day I die, the thing that I remember most, he said, I'm doing this for you. I will still love you when you're through. I'm doing this for you. Though it took me by surprise when I saw love in his eyes, he said, I'm doing this for you. The sacrifice that day at Calvary was the Father's perfect plan to set men free. I'm I will still love you when you're through. I'm doing this for you. Oh, it took me by surprise when I saw love in his eyes. He said, I'm doing this for you. Oh, it took me by surprise when I saw love in his eyes. I'm doing this for
Alrighty, well, it's good to see everybody here today, and thank you for being here. We got some that are on vacation already. School's about out, and for a lot of people, I know some schools already gotten out. Yesterday was their last day, or today may be their last day, and so 'tis the season. Anybody got any plans to go out of the country over the summer? No. All right. So. If you get out of Walton County, huh? Yeah. Well, if you just go up to Sonnet, you're in Gwinnett County, so at least do that. Yeah. And welcome to those that are watching online, our Wednesday in the Word group. And so I appreciate everybody being here today. I'll be praying for Dennis and Ravonda. They are in I don't know where they're at. They're on the beach. They're in Myrtle Beach. And so hopefully they're having a great time there, and the weather is good there. Appreciate you praying for the funeral services on Monday, and the Lord gave me good liberty there, so I was grateful for that. Continue praying for the White family as they still grieve over this young man who lost his life. 13, 14-year-old name was Eli. Matter of fact, his birthday was the day we had the funeral, so he turned 14 on that day. Would have. And then be praying for Randy Rollins. Randy is in the east side. I got the information last night. I followed up this morning, and Karen said that he's headed back to surgery to remove the port that they put in yesterday in order to inject medicine. He had a blood clot. And now they're going to be removing the port, possibly put a stent in for drainage, and he is in critical care right now. So that's James Rawley. You know James, and he has a little bit of a speech impediment because of an injury earlier on in his life, older guy, and had lost his brother a couple of years ago. So pray for James as he goes through that as well. I'll probably head up there and see him just a little bit after the group here. So. Alrighty. Oh, and I think Jarrett is having a procedure, I was told. I don't know if that's true or not. I think Dennis texted and said that he was having a heart procedure on Thursday. And so if you think about that, pray for him as well. And if you didn't get the link on Thursday for the Facebook page, on Sunday, the Facebook page group, I'd love for you to get that. I'll give it to you right afterwards. And we created a page just for our church members to be able to see stuff, and stuff like that. All that yesterday was going on there. So if you were a member of that group, then you're able to get those that information on there. And that keeps us from sending you a bunch of emails, but allows us to get information to the church. And that just seems to be one of the ways that we're able to do that a little bit quicker than the once a week email. All right, and so it's a private group consisting of church members. All right, or church attenders. So. All right, well, take your Bible, turn to Ecclesiastes chapter number 3 is where we're going to take our text from today. And I really appreciate you guys being here so faithful on Wednesdays. I really do. It means a lot, taking time out of your schedules to come and to learn. So, but let me ask you this. Do you ever take time to reflect on your life? Do you take time to sit down and just kind of remember your journey so far? How do you do that? I see some heads nods. And what does that look like for you? Is there certain things that make you do that, certain times in life, certain seasons, or is that something you do on a weekly basis? You kind of go out and sit? What does that look like for you guys? You kind of shook your heads a little bit. Help me out. No wrong answer here, by the way, all right? I'm just curious.
I guess when a special occasion comes up,
Oh, okay.
we might remember something that we experienced and then remember what our girls went through and then grandchildren.
Gotcha. So maybe a special occasion will cause you to, am I still in the screen there?
Yeah.
So maybe a special occasion would cause you to go back and start talking about, oh, you remember back when we were first married and we had, okay. All right. Is that probably the majority of the way you go back and reflect? What about you?
I think more about work, my work history and what I did, and do I think I did a good job, really? And you know, you kind of don't get or second guess yourself later in life.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say that the older we get, the better we were.
Exactly, and I think that's probably true.
But you're having second guesses about it.
You say, maybe I wasn't quite as good as I thought I was.
Yeah. Gotcha, yeah.
I think about that a lot.
So what triggers that? Anything or just So does that cause regret?
I have a little bit.
Oh yeah? Anything you can share or just more private stuff? I mean, I'm not saying in specific instances. I'm talking about just generality.
I wonder if you could have done better.
Okay. Okay.
Did I make the right decision, right choices, that sort of thing?
I got you. Now you obviously can't go back and undo those or redo those. So then, what's your next step at that point? It is what it is.
You just have to accept it.
Own it.
Yeah. Yeah. I asked Linda, I said, how do you think we did? You know, she said, we did, so
Yeah.
it makes me feel better.
That's good. Yeah. That support right there. Okay, good. Thanks for opening up like that. It's going to help me here in just a second. This is where I'm getting to. Think about your mama. What usually triggers that? Like Mother's Day type stuff, or special occasions, birthdays, or what? Just
couldn't come home.
How old were you when your mom passed away? Do you remember?
She passed away in 92.
92. Okay, so that's been 20 years. So,
She was such a sweet lady.
how old were you when she passed away then? 20 years ago,
I was 73.
when she passed away. How old was your mom when she passed away?
90.
Wow, that's long wise.
She, on the day she passed away, we had been out in the car that morning doing our little errands, come back home, and I fixed lunch, and she came in, and she sat down to eat. She didn't eat very much. I said, Mom, I don't think you did. And I think I'll call the doctor. And she was sitting in the living room. And I called the doctor, and just a few minutes later, she says, well, has the doctor called you back? I said, not yet, but he probably will. And she passed away.
Wow. So how long did she live with you?
I never left.
Oh, okay.
When my husband, when I married, he moved in with us because I'd always take care of
Taking care of your mama. Wow. And that's something neat. Good. I appreciate you sharing that story. And I didn't know you were over 90 years old.
93, almost 94.
That's unbelievable. You're doing a good job. You are killing it. Good job. Nice. All right. Now, if you were complaining about how bad you felt this morning, how crickety and crackety your body was, just suck it up, Buttercup. All right. You got more years. Miss Deb, any reflection? I saw you nodding your head. How do you go about doing that? Is that a set, designated type thing?
Really? In fact, I think about it a lot, actually. Most of the time, it's like when I've gone out to feed the baby goat, and then I come back in and I just sit in the lawn chairs out there in the driveway for a while, and just, I look around and I just can't believe what God's given me.
Gotcha.
And the only kind of, when you look back, the opportunity that I had to be saved one time, and I hate to say I blame it on somebody else, but I was in my boyfriend's church. I've been going to church with him and Sunday school I even found a Bible that he had given me when I graduated, and I had the plan of salvation in my Bible. And I went up to be baptized. Sorry about that. But he, when I went up, they didn't make sure I was really saved. I do not remember anybody actually talking to me and asking me to make sure that I really knew what I was doing. And consequently, I was only 17 years old at the time. So that means I went through, what, 10, 12 more years.
Before you actually got saved.
Really got saved. And during those 12 more years is when I went off the deep end.
Yeah.
And
Living for yourself, huh?
so,
Yeah.
And so a lot of things have gone through my mind about that. If I had really gotten saved, then how different would my life be? But then I flip it around and I think that I probably would never have met Bug. And I probably would never have what I have right now.
So it's interesting. I had this conversation like you're talking about there with someone the other day, and we were discussing that. We're discussing God's will for our life, and does God have a perfect will for us? We'll talk about that, teach about that here in the days ahead. But does God have a perfect will for our life? And if He does, and we don't do His plan, then how does that correspond, and how does He continue to lead us and guide us and that sort of thing? So it's interesting on that when we start thinking about that. So I've asked you about reflection, and to your point just a minute ago about people making professions of faith when they're young or earlier in life or not sure. I'm scared to death that there are people in our church sitting in our pews, sit and listen to the message I preached last Sunday about the blood of Jesus Christ, who cannot take me to a time in history where this is where I got saved. And they just I've kind of always been saved. I kind of always feel like I believe God, and they haven't never actually, and again, I'm not looking for an exact date. I'm looking for that moment in time there where you can say, that was the time I trusted Christ. Because I believe the devil so easily can convince us that we're good, we're fine. I mean, we're in church. We've been in church for 57 years. How can I not be saved? I've been in church that long, And He is satisfied letting you sit in church, serve, be kind, sweet, and all this, and not have that eternal security settled down. So that's why I always preach and always bring evangelistic aspect to our messages, because I still want the Holy Spirit to draw, right? So I ask you, ever take time to remember to reflect? Do you ever take time to refresh, rejuvenate, regroup? What does that look like? Do you take time to get away? Do you schedule those things? Well, Crockett, you still running and gunning over there at the Chick-fil-A and heading up all these kids. How do y'all do that in y'all's life? Refresh your minds, refresh your bodies, rejuvenate.
It's good that he's away and works 4 days a week. So it just gives us more time on the weekends. We appreciate that time.
Okay.
But spending time with our grandchildren has gotten to be, almost like when either one of us think about not being here, my thought is not that my children will miss me, but it's that my grandchildren.
So it's transitioned then from children to grandchildren now?
And so I think, well, I want to see them graduate from school and go to college, and I pray for that. Let them be healthy until that time. And our youngest grandchild just turned 8.
So you got a ways to go. You better keep it going, right?
But we do, we go out on the weekends and go to antique shops and things like that.
Okay. I think it's important, though, right, that we do that as we get older, because we can lose sight of the here and now, and we can kind of think, well, I'm right ready to kick out of here, and so what's the point type of stuff. I know a lot of people catching this. I catch myself now more often talking about how time is flying by. And y'all told me years ago, the older you get, the faster it's going to go. And I didn't believe you, you know. I still don't believe you to the point that it's going to happen, I'm sure, right? I mean, I believe you now, but to what point? I heard people talking about how time is getting away from us. You know, man, I only have, 7 more good years, perhaps, of health and vitality, and how time may be running out. The title of the study today is There Is a Time, okay? And Ecclesiastes, the wisest man in all the world, Solomon, wrote some things in here that helps us with time. So let me read a few verses here, then I'll make some comments for today. Ecclesiastes 3, and we'll look at verse number 1. He says, to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. All common sense stuff, right? Plant a garden, and everybody's going to be, die that was born. He says there's a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to cast away, a time to rend and tear apart, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. He even said there's a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. He has several things in the first 8 verses, time, right? And he's just saying basic things that we all kind of understand and know. There's a time to plant, a time to harvest. And so he's just kind of catching us all right there. And then he says this, what profit hath he, now not profit like the prophet of God, but like what money do you make? What does it earn you type thing? What profit, he was talking about money here, but he's talking about what do you gain? What profit hath he that worketh in that wherein he laboreth? He says, so what's the point? What do we get out of pouring ourselves into life and working our fingers to the bone, as it were? He said, I've seen the travail which God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He says, God hath made everything beautiful in his time. Also, he hath set the world in their heart, so that no man can find out the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. He says, I know that there is no good in them, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life. He's talking about the life of our years. He says, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. He says, it's the gift of God. He says, I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. And God doeth it, that men should fear before him. So let's take a look at these verses right here, and in particular the last 5 or so. Solomon, who has achieved or acquired basically anything and everything a human could possibly ever achieve or acquire, whether it was fame, fortune, women, wine, wealth, it was all his. And he's reflecting on some of the aspects of his life. He's looking back. He's writing concerning the journey that he's been on. Just like we talked a little this morning, kind of jogging our memories a little bit. In the first 8 verses, he used the word time like 29 times. All right? On average, he used it more than, about 3 times a verse. So time is the deal there. And so that's what he's getting to. So I want to talk, first of all, about the burden of time. In verses 9 and 10, we see this. He says, what profit hath he that worketh in that wherein he laboreth? I've seen the travail which God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. He says, look, over time, we have our trials, and we have our tragedies, and we have our struggles. And God's work, and we labor, and we do this, and we do that, and we pour our lives, and he says, what has it gained us? Now, here's a guy who knows wealth. He accumulated wealth. So he understands. It's not like, he's thinking about, man, my nest egg, my retirement. What a job. He's like, even that. He goes, really, what What is it? And this burden of time. He's like, all this time in my life. At the end of the day, how did I do? What did I do? And was it worth it? And all the decisions that I made, were they, how did it all pan out? At the end of the day, how does it work out? And then he talks about the beauty of time. Not only the burden of time, but the beauty of time. Verse 11, he said, he hath made everything, talking about the Lord. He's made everything beautiful in his time. He has set the world in the heart so that no man can find out the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. He's like, look, the beautiful thing about this is that God is still in control. He's regardless of how successful, how unsuccessful, how hard we, he says all of that. He says God still has a plan, and God still has put beauty in his timing. And then we'll talk about the bidding of time. Bid our time. You've heard that phrase, right? He bid his time. I know there is no good. Look at verse 12. He says, I know that there is no good in them. He's talking about the years. He says, I know that there's no good in them, but for a man to rejoice and to do good in his life. Now, it's pretty solid and almost a little bit, kind of cock your head a little bit when you read that. So he intimates here to us that in the end, when compared to eternity, he says, look, there's nothing, quote unquote, of value concerning the physical or the temporal work of man. He says they're just not. You had a lot of plans that you drew, didn't you, brother, over time, over the years. He says, like, okay, yeah, I mean, were you an architectural engineer? Civil, mechanical, electrical. So a lot of things that you did, some of those buildings that you actually drew plans for, or electrical plans for, or machines or whatever, perhaps not even in existence anymore, right? Some of those facilities may be just non-used, or you're not used for what it was designed for, or there's systems themselves that you designed things. Yeah, it moved on. Now, for a season, it was what was needed. It was necessary. But like you said, technology is gone. It's moved on. And we could go through all of our stuff. You say, well, I'm in the service, a people service, right? I get that. Even that in and of itself. And so he's like, okay, look, is there anything of value concerning all the activities of man? Now, he doesn't negate, and this is really important to understand, he doesn't negate whatsoever, and we never see this in the scriptures, by the way. He never negates the mandate to work hard. He never negates the command to take care of our families, which is, in fact, what we're doing as we serve and as we work, right? But he does bring our attention to the lasting effect of it. What's the significance of it? At the end of the day, what I did, what value of is it? And he's like, honestly, it's not of eternal value. Unless obviously it had eternal, consequences. And maybe that's a question we need to ask ourselves more often. And so I guess the questions I want to ask and talk about here in the last few minutes we have is, are we enjoying the life that God has allowed us, even gifted us, as we'll see in a few moments, to have? Are we enjoying the life that God has given us or gifted us to have? If you look at verse 13, he says also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It's the what? Gift of God. So here's the thing. Psalm is not telling us that we should go party our life away, so to speak. Hey, eat, drink, and be merry, live footloose and fancy free. Yet he's telling us that we should enjoy our lives as we live them. It's like, look, well, we got breath, enjoy it. Embrace it. Don't begrudge it. There's no reason, he says, to not enjoy the lives we have been afforded to live. And matter of fact, he says it's the gift of God. God's gifted you that. There are people that you went to school with, people that you have grew up with, people you've gone to church with, people you have worked with, that no longer have a life here on earth. They're gone. And God's gifted you. And sometimes I've heard people say, especially as we get a little bit older, you know, I'm ready. I am ready. He can check me out anytime. And I get that. I'm glad you're ready. But that doesn't mean we should just give up on life. Right? I mean, that doesn't mean we should do things to shorten it. He's like, look, no, enjoy your life. The stage that you're in right now. I don't care if we're 13, 30, or 93. We're to enjoy. Almost 94. Ooh. 44, 94. How about that? Is that better? We should enjoy that. Is it tough? Sure. There's more work and effort to get where we need to go and do what we need to do, and we can't see at night as well anymore, and blah, blah, blah. But he's like, hey, that's the gift of God. He's given you that. Don't try to shortchange that. Yeah, let's ask ourselves some questions this morning. Do we realize that our lives are a gift from God? Do we look at it that way, or do we ever feel like it's a curse? Do we realize that in His sovereignty, that God has chosen us, He's allowed us to exist to the day we're at right now? Do we also realize that God wants us to enjoy the life that we have? He does. Now, Miss Alma was just talking about her grandchildren. She has, and many of you have already done that. I have not had grandchildren yet, so I don't know what that is. I mentioned that on Sunday. It may change, but right now it will. Yeah, I heard it. So I better go ahead and believe that, like I believed y'all before about the time. They say that it is, you know, it's just a different type of a love, and you just don't understand it until you've been there. And I could, okay. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I believe you. Just haven't experienced it yet, right? It's almost like you have a new lease on life, so to speak, is what I've been told a little bit. It's kind of like now, yeah, we help, you know, our kids are, you know, we reared them, we got them up, they're out on their own, they're doing their thing, they're out of the nest, boom, boom, boom. And so it's like, you know, they have their life, we kind of have ours, but now all of a sudden the grandbabies are in it, or have been in it. You're like, okay, I want to be part of their life. I want to help them succeed. I want them to enjoy life. And so as a result of that, it's almost like we have this, okay, obligation again, but more than that, an opportunity to live our life. You say, well, we don't have grandchildren, and we don't know what that's like. That does not, look, being a grandparent is not the end all and the be all, right? Doesn't make you the most happiest person in the world just because you have grandchildren, right? You still have your struggles, you still have to deal with things. So there's a thin line here that some people do muddy up in their lives. I get that. But it appears that we should rejoice. Look at verse number 12. I know there's no good in them, but for a man to rejoice. So it appears that we should rejoice, and then in verse number 13, to enjoy. What does it say? And that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. So it appears that we should rejoice and enjoy this life that God has gifted us. That's what the wisest man in all the world is saying to us. He's like, look, you worked hard. You did good. That's great. Kudos to you. He says, but are you enjoying it? Well, it's not as much as I wanted in retirement. I didn't want to. That's not what he's saying. No amount of money is going to bring happiness. You're like, well, I like to bring it, whatever it brings me, I'll take, you know. But at the end of the day, honestly, there are some people I know who are dirt poor. And they are the sweetest, kindest, most happy. What the scripture says with godliness, there's godliness, contentment with great gain is godliness. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, it's great gain.
With contentment is great gain. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. Because we don't live very contented lives. We always want. And I don't guess that ever changes. A little bit more here, a little bit more there, a little different here, a little different there. And I asked you earlier, you go back and reflect. And everybody here could say, you know what, if we would have sold our house back when the market was, are you with me? If we wouldn't have taken that job, moved out of state, and would have stayed right here and kept this house. We could have sold that. We could have, the rent could be, look, we all have those conversations. And that will never change. I meet way too many people who have no joy in their life, regardless if there's money in the bank or not, regardless if they're married or not, regardless if they're healthy or not. And the list goes on and on and on of people who just have no joy in their life. And for me, for one, I want to make sure that my life is pleasing to the Lord, first and foremost, which will include my service, my testimony, my witness for Him, right? Then two, I want to enjoy and rejoice with the life He's given me. Y'all have taught me that life is too short not to enjoy it, not to embrace it, not to live it to its fullest. And that's different for everybody, right? Somebody embrace life and live it to the fullest is jet setting all across the world. And they're cruising here and cruising there and flying here. That's, to them, that's living life at the fullest. Life of the fullest could be sitting on the back deck after you fed some goats and you're sitting in a lawn chair, just reflecting back, God, you're good to us. Right? Enjoying and rejoicing in life He's given us is when, we don't have any grandbabies, but you know what? That was God's plan for our life, then okay, let's accept that. I was taught by a man who came and did a marriage conference for us years ago at the church. We're out of state when we did it. He had a senior in high school and just graduated, I think, or is about to graduate in May. Anyways, around that time frame. And they were going to I think it was a professional basketball game. The son and some buddies, whatever. Anyway, he died in a car wreck on the way to the game. I think they have 6, 7, 8 kids. I'm not real sure. And man, good kid, served, and just it rocked the church and the school. Everybody's world was just couldn't believe it. And he said he and his wife struggled, obviously, as any parent would. He said in the first year, we'd be doing things like going somewhere or driving somewhere. He said my wife would say, I wonder if that's the kind of girl that their son would marry. They would see something about college, and I wonder where he would have went to school. He would have been da 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 this year or whatever. And he said we were doing that pretty regularly. He said one day it dawned on me that wasn't God's will. He says, and so we talked and we kind of helped ourselves understand, realize, what? We don't need to say that anymore. Because all that does is exasperates the pain. It hurts. And thinking about what would have been, that's what his grandkids would have looked like, what have you. He says when we realized it didn't happen. That's not the way God designed that, willed that. And we don't understand that. We don't have to appreciate that. He says we have to understand that's where it's at. He said, no, it's not like we still don't ever do that, right? Because they're human. He said, but that helped them understand that, hey, God has a purpose and a plan for our lives. Sometimes it's longer than others. Now look, when we talk about God's will, though, it doesn't mean that even though God is aware of what takes place in our life, doesn't mean He's willing that, if that makes any sense. For instance, my wife and I both firmly believe that God sent us to one another. That I believe that she was God's perfect mate for me, perfect woman, perfect spouse for me. And there's no doubt, never questioned, never wondered, I wonder if it would have been like if I would have married such and such. Or, was this one real one? That's never crossed my mind. Can't say it ain't crossed hers, but it's never crossed mine. I definitely outpunted my coverage on that one. But to know that, but let's just say, for instance, all of a sudden, she got sideways with me, and to the point where she's like, I'm done. I'm through with ministry. I'm through. I want to go and I want to do this, I want to do that. And if that's not you, if you're not going to leave, the church, the ministry, whatever, then I'm going to do it by myself. And she were to walk out on me. Now, I don't think that God's will would be for her to divorce me. But divorce happens in good people's lives, right? So does that then take them out of God's will? So let's just say, I believe that was God's will for me to marry my wife. I believe that was His plan. I don't even refrain from plan A, plan B, because He has a plan. It is plan A. It is number one. But that doesn't mean that somebody else can't go against His plan, right? I can counsel people all the time, but I can't force somebody to stay in a marriage. You pray for somebody that God would heal them. And God would heal them. God would heal them and get them off that that drug or that disease, that alcohol they're on. And then you pray and pray and pray, and they just stay after it and stay addicted, and eventually they take their life because of that. You're thinking, man, I don't think it was God's will they would die like that. Well, they made a choice, right? And so what it boils down to, I think, in the crux and in the decision point to the challenge today, there's nothing so significant, there's nothing so horrific in my life that it will alter the will and the ways of God. That's why I must surrender my life to Him. To live with the dread to displease Him. I believe that's kind of what the fear of God is. The dread to displease Him. I don't want to displease Him. Cooper Kennedy back there today, he fears me as the pastor in the sense that he doesn't want to displease. There's a sense of reverence there, right? And so there's a sense, a healthy type of a fear or whatever. He just doesn't want to displease me, right? Now, I could abuse that. I could abuse that, and a lot of people do. God never does. And so I must surrender my life to Him. In other words, I should live my life with the fear of God ever present in it. And I'll show you why. In verse 14, He says, I know, this is where I see this at. He says, I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it. Nothing can be taken from it. God doeth it, that men should fear before Him. You say, why is that a big deal? Because in every generation, the wicked, the unrighteous, live without this fear of God that Solomon speaks right here. And it starts in the Old Testament. We see it written there all the way to the New Testament. In the Old Testament, David says, Psalm 36, the transgression of the wicked saith within my heart that there is no fear of God before His eyes. You fast forward to the New Testament in Romans, and Paul says in chapter 3, verse 18, there is no fear of God before their eyes. In each of the thoughts that I gave you this morning, talking about the bidding and the burden and the beauty of time, we see that these things were given by God to man. Look in verse 10 again. We see that God hath given to the sons of men to be exercised in it. Verse 11 says, the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end. And in verse 13, the gift of God. So at this, quote, time in my life, I am determined to enjoy and rejoice with the life that God's granted me, yet within the compounds and the boundaries of the fear of God. You see, when we come to the point in our lives where we realize that we are honoring, we are serving, we are submitting, we are reverencing God, we are yielded to Him in every aspect that we can possibly do. Yeah, we will mess up, sure, but overall, as the common practice is, we're trying to live for the Lord. We're trying to do right. We're trying to yield to Him. We're trying to do right to people that, like you said out there. At that point, God says, enjoy your life. Don't be so burdened that you're not living perfect, that you didn't have a perfect life, that you didn't set everything up the way that the world says you should have financially or physically. He says, don't get caught up in that. That's robbing you of the joy that I want you to have in life. So enjoy it and rejoice in it. You can teach your children and your grandchildren an awful lot by the way you live your life. They see you. They see you respond to problems and actions and your health issues. What a great thing for your kids and your grandkids to know, I very seldom ever remember hearing my grandmama complain about anything. I never really remember hearing my granddad complain about stuff. He was sick, but he had his issues. He had a horrible life, but he just seems to enjoy his life. That's what Solomon's saying. At the end of the day, what we did accomplish, what we didn't accomplish. He goes, enjoy your life and rejoice in it. We hope that was an encouragement to you tonight. You may want to know more information. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you'd like to pray with somebody and talk to somebody about some spiritual matters in your life. We have a pastoral care line, and we would love for you to be able to call. We have pastors standing by right now to be able to take those calls and assist you. We also have Wednesday night program for our teens as well as our young people. We have an Awana program here, and perhaps you or someone you know might like to be a part of that. You can find this and a whole lot more information on our website, VictoryBaptist.Church. God bless you and have a great evening.